Thank you, Bob. Now Grace Pack, founder of Jack Jack Bird, will tell us her unexpected story of faith and entrepreneurship. Have you ever been called to a vocation you were not expecting? Grace never sought or desired a leadership role in business, but felt God's calling to this area nonetheless. She will talk to us about how she wrestled with the challenges of becoming a leader and followed her passions for faith and family to create a thriving company. Started without a business plan and barely any capital, Jack Jack Bird's products are now carried in Target, Nordstrom, Anthropologie, and many other top retailers. Please see our first poll question beneath the video as Grace Pack begins her presentation.
Hi, I'm Grace, the founder and owner of Jack Jack Bird. I've been an owner for about a good 15, 16 years, probably a little more than that if we talk about exactly when I started the company. But if you knew anything about me and my background, you would have least suspected that I would be an entrepreneur today. And that is only because God steered this boat and not myself. Thank God, because God is the only one that has brought me to this point, and there would have been no way I would have ever guessed my career path at this season of my life where I'm at. And so with that said, I would love to say that I would caveat this to say that everything that I talk about was because God has had the will to give me this, to get to this point, and that is something that I'm very grateful for. So it all starts back when my graduate degree, I was in theology, and I was in seminary ready to go for my PhD in hermeneutics of all things to England. And I was a little hesitant because I had gotten my master's at this point, and I just assumed that, my next step would be to do my PhD. And when I applied for this program that this professor wanted to, that I wanted to study under this professor, I was a little hesitant because it was a big financial and time commitment. I wasn't sure if this is the path that God was leading me. And so I prayed and said, God, if you want me to, do this program, you need to let me in, because it was not an easy program to get into. And after I prayed that prayer, I got into the program. And then as soon as I got into the program, it was about 3 or 4 months before I actually was leaving for it. And I prayed that God would just give me a clear sign. Okay, so I got into this program, but if you really want me to go, make it very known. And if you don't, then I'm gonna, bow out. And I said this to God, and I said, unless I get married in the next 3 months, which that was the time when I was about to leave, there's no other reason why I shouldn't be going. And 3 months came, and the answer was I got married. So it's a crazy journey of my faith, because I look at that opportunity, and that was the turning point of this business, because I got married to a military man, a military officer. I was born and raised in Chicago all my life, and I was studying in Chicago at that time when I met my husband at a coffee shop. It was like two ships passing in the night, where he was heading to Korea, being stationed there, and I was, heading to England. And I was studying at this coffee shop, and he was helping his parents' coffee shop out. And that's when we started to talk a lot. And so I would come in every day for 2 weeks straight, and we talked about everything in life. And we both realized that we're both Christians. The last night before he left, he had asked me out and said that he wanted to keep in touch. And I knew exactly where this was going, because he had told me about his views on marriage and dating and relationship. And so I decided to make the plunge and decided to get to know him. And in the 4 weeks on the phone that we were on talking, and before even the cell phone, well, cell phones were still there, but we couldn't like internationally talk on cell phones, but before any of the cheap plans that you can now do to get on the internet and talk, we talked over a phone card, and we racked up $900 of phone bills. And, or I should say I did on my end. And after I flew out to Korea, in 4 weeks after that, we got married. So we eloped, and I eloped to this man who I've only known for 6 weeks. And it was a very painful process after that, because even though I thought I knew him, he was a Christian, he was, an officer in the military. We're both had the same, ethnic background in that we're both Korean American. We come from the same hometown. I just thought, okay, that makes all the boxes check off, and we're the perfect couple. But that was not the case. And we had a very difficult marriage in the beginning. And we, with the first year in Korea, we had a really up and down time, especially for me, because as a Korean, I thought that I knew the culture well, even though I visited a couple times, and I knew the language well, but I really didn't know it fluently. It was a culture shock for me, because I wasn't used to the culture at all. And not only was that a culture shock, but the military culture was also a big shock, because I didn't know anything about the military. So I felt very aimless. I felt like I was a student at one point, someone who was a working professional student going off for my PhD. And the next thing I know, I'm in middle of Korea, part of being a military spouse, whatever that meant, because I had no idea what that even meant, and what an officer spouse, and what all the obligations that come with it. And that was a very interesting time. And I did a lot of soul searching of what I'm going to be doing, because I didn't think that I felt this hole where, because I wasn't doing what I wanted to do, I didn't know what was next. I thought just being a wife and a mom at that point would have been enough, but surely it wasn't for me. And then we moved to Colorado. I get pregnant with my first child and my second child. And I'm in this world of parenting. And that's another topic, is that I never thought I was ever going to be a parent. Not to say that I had this goal of not ever being a parent, but it was just never something where I desired to be a mom one day. And I know for many of you guys, you probably don't feel the same way, but for me, I just never grew up having a very strong sense of family values, because I didn't grow up with a very strong sense of family values, in my life. And so, but being a mother gave me a lot of fulfillment, and being part of the world of diaper changing and baby food. And while that's obviously, challenging, I also found fulfillment in just, wanting to having the kids to wear the best clothes, the best, and having the best toys. And one of the areas that I really loved was their toys and education. That was something that I was challenged to really look after for them, and something that I really wanted to spend time doing a lot of research. And so I did. And I always felt like I had an entrepreneur heart. So what I did was I started to research about online stores. And at that time, back in the early 2000s, online store was definitely something that was coming into, people shopping online was becoming more and more common, but still was not a common thing like we have today. And so I remember, searching through baby brands, wooden toys. And that's when I started to think about, oh, maybe I should start a wooden toy business, because that was what I was into with my kids. In DC, when I moved to DC, I started to sell some wooden toys, and I loved doing it, but there was a part of me where I still felt like, okay, maybe I wanted to make things for people and not sell things to people on what other people made, because I felt this like need to be creative in a different way, a different outlet. And so I started to look and rethink my business and thought, okay, I love this online area. I'm a parent. This is the world I live in. Let me do something different, and let me look at, making bibs and placemats. And while it doesn't sound exciting now, looking back, it was an exciting thing for me, because at that time, the only things that kind of sold were baby products that were all in juvenile prints, little teddy bears, little hearts, little rainbows. And you never saw like diaper bags, bibs, and stroller covers in like chic, cool mom prints that you would get like if you're at a store buying a dress for yourself. So then that's what I did. I went to the fabric store and I started picking out fabrics, making baby products with everyday fabrics that you would use, that you would see in the home or on your wardrobe. And then I started, because I was living in this cool little town in DC. It was Alexandria. There was a lot of little stores and boutiques, and I started to make these bibs, and I started to show it to them, and they started to pick it up and order it, and then they would reorder. And I thought, okay, I have a business plan. I think I have a business here. So as a officer wife, and an officer, especially in the Air Force, we move every 3 to 4 years. And because of that, as a spouse, it's very hard to take on any job that's stable and to really build a career out of being an officer spouse. So a lot of officer spouses would work at the base that we were, stationed at, whatever positions that they can find within the base, that's where they would work, or they would volunteer a lot of time in their squadron and really, mentor the younger officer spouses, which is also a big ministry opportunity. Or there would be people who would be selling things like on Pampered Chef or Tupperware. And all those things were like creative outlets for them to really serve however they needed to for their family. But for me, God definitely had a different agenda. And that agenda was just everywhere I was at, God gave me the opportunity to really use my gifts and further the business. So when the whole situation, what happened in DC, then we moved to Alabama. I was able to really reach the Southeast territory by being part of the Atlanta show, but it gave me the opportunity to see the market and to see the customers and to see what they're like. And they're very different from the market that I was at when I was in DC. And that gave me the liberty to show off my products in that area, and it was very widely received. The other opportunity that I had was when I was living in Japan, and opening my market up in Japan, securing my manufacturing in Asia, because Japan obviously is close to, the rest of Asian countries like China and Korea. And I was able to source a lot of products there. And that's actually where I met my current partner now, that we work very closely with in our manufacturing and QA process. I'm sorry, quality and assurance control process. We do a lot of it with our partner now that I've had for many, many years. And then finally, when I was able to go to Germany, that whole market, opened up the whole European territory. And so as God has really brought me to these places, I realized that I didn't have this agenda of, most people who probably have their MBA, which I don't, and I learned all of this by hard knocks and just my own experience. They have a plan for their revenue, how they're going to grow, how they're going to start. And that is not how my company started. It was very organic, all the way from the way we started to even to this point. Everything was done in a way wherever God put me in, I had to kind of go with the flow. And I took that opportunity to use it to my advantage. And the people that I met along the way. So the other thing that I just loved about what I did was, when you live in a place like Japan, Korea, or Germany, as someone who's in the military, you're only meeting mostly your military, colleagues that are in the base. That's who you're really getting to know, because, there's a language barrier when you're in Japan and Germany and Korea. And so a lot of your friendships are going to happen within your military squadron or the people that you work with. But for me, I was able to really venture out and make relationships with people in that country. I still have great friends in Japan and in, Germany. I'm here right now, and in different parts of Europe, because I was able to strike up that business relationship with a lot of the colleagues here. So that was another opportunity that I had that I would have never had if God didn't take me in these areas. So with that said, branding, which is also interesting, and this is just my own, awareness, is that the way I know branding and the way I see branding in the way Americans do things is very, one way. But then I go to Europe, and their branding is very different. And especially in France, it's beautiful. It's just, you never see any of the way they package things, the way they put things together, and the way they see beauty is so different. And I'm refined and inspired by that. And so Jack Jack Bird to me is a compilation of not just American influence, but all the different influences of where I've lived. And I can definitely say that there's no way Jack Jack Bird and the way we brand things is the way it would be if I didn't have these other international experience. And so that brings me to the next point, is our products. One thing that I just love about our line is that it's supposed to be screen-free play, everything creativity unplugged. It's renewable, recyclable art products for kids. But the message behind that, in the way we put things together, is all about for the child to really see who is the creator in all things, that there is a designer behind there, that it's like the watchmaker who makes the clock. There, that design argument, a teleological argument for design. And that is something that I always want to be evangelizing to the kids about, that when you look at our line, you see God in it. You see God because when we talk about, for instance, one of our prints are about gnomes, because it's very fantasy-like and they're into gnomes. But then in the gnomes, they're in eucalyptus rainbow trees. And so they're like, what is this eucalyptus rainbow tree? And we talk about what a eucalyptus rainbow tree is, or about unicorns. They love unicorns, but then we tie it with moonbows and rainbows. And what are rainbows and moonbows, and what do they represent? And we try to really bring a lot of creation into our products in a subtle way that's beautiful and very branded, so that they understand as kids that they can discover wonder, because many kids don't, because they're always on the screen and nothing, wows them anymore. And, same as adults, when we are always looking at things on the screen, we're not wowed by nature as much as we would be. And that's something we wanted to really bring to the table in this day and age for kids, especially in the digital age market. And so we talk about that a lot. We talk about rediscovering wonder, how you see the lilies of the field, and yet Solomon, in all his, richness and glamour, was never clothed as well as the lilies of the field. And I think about that passage in Matthew. And so that that is like an inspiration for me for in the way we really want to evangelize to the kids, and that's been so important for us as a brand. The other part that I really struggle with as a brand, or as an entrepreneur, I should say, is that I'm a leader. And by default, because I make these things and because, I founded it, I'm the CEO. But at the same time, I had a really hard time with that role and just making business decisions, making hard decisions that I don't want to make. I just wanted to be the follower, the person who just follows orders. And yet, that's not where God placed me. And I complained for many years. I'd say out of the 15, 16 years I've been doing this, I probably complained good 14 years of it. And I still do, to my husband, about why am I in this hard place? Like, if I could just only design and make the product, and then someone else handles all the business end of the business and the finances, then I'd be happy. Or if someone else can fire that person or hire that other person. And God said, and I remember my husband said, Grace, why do you kick against the goads when God is calling you to be a leader? He's giving you this awesome privilege to be a leader, but yet you don't want to be that leader. And so many people want to be that, and yet you don't look at it as a privilege, but you look at it as a burden. And that really hit me. And even though I struggle with that still to this day, I think that is an area where I feel like God has really given me a better perspective to see how I can lead the people that I work with, even my own customers, because they look to me to tell them about what sells and what doesn't, and what the trend is. And so I think that's going to be always a struggle that I need to see as being a privilege rather than a burden. And I continue to really, really deal with that even today. And then finally, my last thing that I would like to share is just that there's always, no matter how long I've been doing this business, you're always learning. And I think that is such a important perspective and attitude to have, that as Christians, we're humble, because I don't care how much pedigree you have, how much knowledge you have, how much experience you have, you always have a place to learn. You're always a student before you're a teacher. And because you're always a student before a teacher, then you can teach. Jesus was always serving. I mean, I think about the Philippians passage where he emptied himself and he gave himself. He was always the servant leader. And I think that is such an important role to embrace as an entrepreneur, especially as a Christian, to know that you should always have a humble approach when people talk to you, when you talk to people, because there's a lot of times where I feel like, hey, I did this. This was, my doing. And I easily forget that God is the one that brought me here, or that I think I know everything. And that you who's been doing this for only a couple of years, what do you know that I don't know? I think a lot of us can cop that attitude. And that's not just, in business, it's in anything, like whatever you think you find pride in, you're going to really think that you know it all. And it's hard to really take on that humble approach. And I think that is such an important thing to internalize, not just to fake it, but to really live that out, and to really truly believe it, that you have so much to learn from others. And as long as you have that perspective, first of all, people will always love you, because people love to tell you about what they know. And then the other thing is, there's so much advantage for you, because that's such a resource for you to take in. And then thirdly, who likes a know-it-all? Most people don't. I don't know anyone that likes a know-it-all, and I definitely could come off that way. And but that is an area where I feel like God is always teaching me to be humble, and to always see things in the light of how he wants us to see and how he wants us to treat people. So I would think that that would be an area that as Christian entrepreneurs, that they can grow in that area, if that's not an area that you have thought about much. We get prideful, and we don't really understand sometimes our place in the world, and we think we know, and we don't. And I think that that's always an important place to be, to know that no matter what your pedigree is or what your experience is, that we come learning and humbly. So I hope that this was a good lecture for you today, to just hear about my story. And it's never to say that what I say is how it should be for you, but I hope that I can at least inspire you to think about some, issues as an entrepreneur, as a Christian, to really grow in this area of entrepreneurship and business and being a good business person. So thank you.